The sun clawed its way over Dust Valley, Texas, a raw border town where the Rio Grande coiled like a rattlesnake through the sagebrush plains, its muddy waters whispering danger under a sky bruised with heat. Dust swirled through cracked streets, past faded storefronts groaning under years of neglect, settling on the Lone Star K9 facility, a rugged patch of kennels and sheds carved from the unforgiving earth. A last stand against the wild South. 5 black SUVs tore through the dawn, their engines snarling like beasts unchained, tires chewing gravel as they bore down on the facility with lethal intent. Inside, Sangre Roja Cartel soldiers grinned with the cocky swagger of men who'd crushed towns like this before. Dust Valley was just another notch on their bloody belt. To them, it was a cakewalk, a crippled woman in a wheelchair, a dog trainer with a couple of mutts, ripe for the breaking. But as those chrome beasts rolled closer that sweltering morning, they didn't know they'd just crossed into the kill zone of Abby Grayson, a former Army K9 handler whose scars hid a warrior's fire, and whose German shepherds, Phantom and Blaze, were about to turn their world into a Texas-sized nightmare. Abby sat on her weathered porch, her wheelchair creaking under her weight, a chipped coffee mug steaming in her scarred hands as her sharp green eyes tracked the horizon. At 36, she was a ghost of special ops. Shrapnel from a Baghdad ambush had claimed her legs, but not her fight. She'd come here to train law dogs and raise her nephew Jake, chasing a quiet life in a town teetering on the edge of chaos. Quiet was a lie when cartels smelled blood, and Dust Valley was bleeding. Beside her, Phantom and Blaze stood like sentinels. Phantom, the gray alpha, his calm a predator's trap. Blaze, black as sin, his energy a storm waiting to break. Perimeter sweep, boys, she called, her voice a steel whip cracked in combat zones, and they moved as one, shadows on the dust. Their service vests hiding the killers forged in war. The facility sprawled wide, kennels flanked by scrubland, fields kissing a dry creek, a fortress masked as a backwater kennel. Its bones built for battle. Inside, Jake packed a go-bag, knife, flashlight, grit in his 15-year-old blood, while beyond the fence, the SUVs slowed, their rumble a taunt in the stillness. Abby's grip tightened, her dog's ears flicking up, sensing the noose tightening. This wasn't a visit, it was war. The cartel thought they'd found a soft target in America's tough-as-nails heartland. A woman broken by war they could bully into dust. They didn't know she'd turned her wheelchair into a command post, her dogs into weapons of vengeance, or that Dust Valley was her Alamo, unyielding, unbroken, ready to bite back. Across town, Rose's diner flickered like a lone star in the gloom, its neon buzz soon to be drowned by the roar of a showdown brewing. A crippled vet, her lethal pack, and a town on the brink. Buckle up, America, because Abby Grayson's about to show these bastards why you don't mess with Texas, or the wolves that guard it. Part 1, Shadows creep into Dust Valley. The sun clawed its way through the dawn haze over Dust Valley, Texas, a border town where the Rio Grande snaked like a restless serpent through the sagebrush plains, whispering tales of grit and peril. Dust swirled through cracked asphalt streets, past faded storefronts with peeling paint and rusted signs creaking in the dry wind, settling on the edges of the Lone Star K9 facility, a rugged outpost of kennels, training yards, and weathered sheds carved from the unforgiving earth. 5 sleek SUVs sliced through the morning mist, their engines growling with a low, predatory rumble, tires chewing gravel as they rolled toward the facility. Inside, soldiers of the Sangre Roja Cartel sat coiled with venomous confidence, their eyes glinting with the arrogance of men who'd swallowed towns like Dust Valley whole, one bloody target at a time. To them, this was a quick kill, a crippled woman in a wheelchair running a dog training gig, a soft mark ripe for breaking and claiming. But as those black beasts of chrome and steel closed in that sweltering morning, they didn't know they'd just rolled into the kill zone of Abby Grayson, a former Army K9 handler whose disability cloaked a warrior's soul, and whose 2 German shepherds, Phantom and Blaze, were forged in the fires of war to unleash hell on anyone foolish enough to cross her. Abby maneuvered her wheelchair across the facility's dirt-packed training yard, her sharp green eyes cutting through the dust to scan the obstacle course where police recruits fumbled through drills under the relentless Texas sun. At 36, she carried the weight of a decade in special ops. Shrapnel from a Baghdad ambush in 2016 had stolen her legs, leaving her with jagged scars and a steel resolve that no explosion could shatter. She'd traded combat boots for this dusty haven, aiming to train law enforcement dogs and raise her 15-year-old nephew, Jake, in the hard-earned peace of a town clinging to the edge of America's wild south. But peace was a mirage in a place where the border bled danger, and cartels sniffed out weakness like vultures circling a dying calf. Beside her, Phantom and Blaze moved like extensions of her will. Phantom, the gray alpha, his stillness a predator's ruse, his pale fur catching the light like a blade unsheathed. Blaze, black as a moonless night, his coiled energy a promise of chaos barely leashed. "Perimeter check, boys," Abby called, her voice a steel thread of command, honed in the chaos of combat zones where hesitation meant death. The dogs flowed in perfect sync, their service vests a flimsy disguise for the killers lurking beneath, their paws silent on the cracked earth as they swept the boundaries with the precision of a military patrol. The facility sprawled across the plains, kennels flanked by scrubland dotted with mesquite and prickly pear, training fields edged by a dry creek bed that snaked toward the river. A natural stronghold most would overlook as just another dusty patch of nowhere. But Abby saw it for what it was, a fortress, its layout a tactical masterpiece disguised as a ramshackle dog haven. She paused by a kennel where a rookie cop, Deputy Sarah Lopez, wrestled with an eager Malinois named Titan, the dog's boundless energy tangling her commands into a mess of barks and lunges. "He's reading you, not just your words," Abby coached, her tone firm but patient, the kind that had steadied green soldiers under fire. Sarah wiped sweat from her brow, frustration creasing her tanned face as she yanked the leash. "Yours don't even flinch, how the hell do you do it?" "Years of sweat and scars," Abby replied, her gaze flicking to the fence line where three men in slick suits lingered, their polished shoes and tailored jackets a glaring mismatch for Dust Valley's grit. Their stares were too sharp, too deliberate, hunters sizing up prey. Phantom's ears twitched, a subtle signal. Blaze tensed, his hackles rising just enough to catch Abby's trained eye. She read them like she'd once read enemy movements through Baghdad's smoke-choked alleys. Dr. Emily Carter pulled up in her beat-up vet truck, her tires kicking dust as she parked near the clinic shed. Her morning check-in a welcome break from the heat. "Your pups are legends, Abby," she grinned, unpacking her kit with the easy rhythm of someone who'd patched up more strays than she could count. "Sheriff still raving about their last eval," said Phantom could sniff out a lie from a mile off. Abby wheeled toward the shed, her chair crunching over gravel, noting how the suits tracked her every move like hawks circling a wounded rabbit. "Just doing my job," she said, her voice dropping low, a murmur meant for Emily alone. "Though we've got eyes lately, too many for coincidence." Emily's smile faded, her hazel eyes narrowing as she followed Abby's gaze. "Fourth time this week I've seen new faces, same vibe, expensive watches, careful steps. Not locals." Abby's mind flashed, Baghdad, 2016, cartel scouts casing her unit's outpost before a raid that left half her team in body bags. "5 times, she corrected softly, her hands tightening on her chair's arms, knuckles whitening. "Different crew yesterday, same playbook." Sheriff Tom Reynolds rolled in, his cruiser's tires spitting dust as he parked. His weathered face tight with the strain of a man stretched thin by a town teetering on the edge. "Drawing a crowd, Abby," he said, his tone casual but laced with an undercurrent of worry that betrayed the lines etched deep around his eyes. "Small-town charm," she replied, watching Phantom and Blaze complete their sweep, their movements a silent dance of vigilance. "Or our new neighbors south of the border stirring trouble?" Tom leaned on his hood, his Stetson shading a gaze that had seen too much. 3 shops got investment offers this week, some development firm out of nowhere. Sound familiar? Abby's thoughts snagged on an envelope she'd found in her mailbox the day before, unsigned. Offering a fat stack of cash for her facility, no questions asked. Nothing worth mentioning, she said, but Phantom's subtle shift, a tilt of his head, a flicker of his ears, told her more suits had arrived. Their SUVs idling like vultures perched on a corpse, engines purring with quiet menace. Ms. Grayson, a smooth voice called, cutting through the dust, "Victor El Cuervo Salazar." The cartel's point man, stepping forward with a predator's grace, his suit pristine against the town's grime, his smile a blade sharpened by years of breaking wills. "We're investors. Impressed by your operation here." Abby wheeled forward, Phantom and Blaze falling into heel with the precision of a drill team, their calm a coiled threat that only she could feel thrumming through their muscles. "Not looking for partners," she said, her voice flat and final, clocking the bulges under their jackets, guns, not wallets, the weight of concealed steel as familiar to her as her own heartbeat. Victor's grin didn't waver, a practiced mask of charm that didn't reach his cold, calculating eyes. "Our employers see potential, lunch to discuss." He extended a hand, but Abby's stare pinned him where he stood. "Dust Valley's unpredictable," she shot back, her words a quiet warning laced with steel. "Might want to look elsewhere." His eyes hardened, a flicker of irritation breaking through the facade. "We're persistent, very persistent." He dropped a business card onto her chair's armrest, the gesture deliberate, a challenge disguised as courtesy, then turned and left, his crew trailing like wolves on a leash. Tom lingered, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. "They'll push harder, heard of break-ins downtown, pressure on shopkeepers." Abby watched the SUVs peel out, dust billowing in their wake like a storm brewing on the horizon. Baghdad playbook, scout, scare, then strike. "They're testing us." "This ain't Iraq, Abby," Tom warned, his hand resting near his holster, fingers twitching with the instinct of a man who'd seen too few deputies hold too thin a line. "Just me and 6 badges against whatever they're packing." "It's home," she countered, her resolve hardening like iron forged in fire. "That's why I fight." As dusk painted the plains a deep, bloody red, Abby stood guard on her porch, Phantom and Blaze pacing the edges of the facility, their shadows stretching long and lethal across the earth. The cartel thought they'd found a soft target, a cripple with a couple of dogs. A woman broken by war. They didn't know she'd turned her limitations into weapons, her wheelchair into a throne of command, or that her pack was forged in the crucible of combat. Ready to tear through flesh and bone. Dust Valley was about to become their reckoning, a battleground where the weak would prove the mighty wrong. At Dust Valley Diner that evening, Abby met Tom over a plate of greasy fries and black coffee, the air thick with the scent of burnt grease and whispered fears. He slid a folder across the table, its edges worn. Spilling grainy photos, Victor Salazar, Enforcer Diego Morales, and Kingpin Mateo El Toro Vargas, a narco-tyrant with a trail of bodies stretching from Juarez to El Paso, his face a map of scars and hate. "They hit you yet?" Tom asked, his voice rough with the weight of a sheriff outgunned and outnumbered. "This morning," Abby said, her eyes flicking to an SUV idling across the street. Its tinted windows reflecting the diner's neon glow like a predator's gaze. Victor played nice, then flexed muscle, offered cash, hinted at consequences. Tom spread intel across the table, surveillance shots of warehouses stacked with crates. Bank records of payoffs to local officials, grainy stills of armed men moving through the night. Feds say they're not just pushers, multi-state ops, military-grade gear. Vargas runs it like a black ops cell. Disciplined and deadly. Abby studied the patterns, urban tactics, city-bred strategies that would stumble in Dust Valley's desert sprawl, its dusty trails and hidden creek beds her domain. Their weakness. They'll trip over their own boots out here, she said, her voice steady with the certainty of a soldier who'd turned terrain into a weapon. My dogs don't play by their rules, and neither do I. Part 2, Dogs Draw First Blood. Night draped Dust Valley, Texas, in a suffocating shroud of heat and silence, the Rio Grande a dark, glistening ribbon winding beyond the sagebrush plains. Its whispers drowned by the stillness of a town holding its breath. The Lone Star K-9 facility stood like a fortress carved from shadow, its kennels and training sheds casting jagged silhouettes under a moonless sky. The air thick with the scent of dust and impending violence. Abby Grayson knew that stillness was a lie, a predator's mask pulled tight before the strike. The Sangre Roja Cartel had scoped her land. Sized up her wheelchair as weakness, threatened her nephew Jake with their creeping presence, and tonight, they'd come to draw blood. She sat in her wheelchair on a ridge overlooking the facility. Her sharp green eyes piercing the dark through night vision binoculars trained on the north fence line, 6 figures creeping through the shadows, their movements precise, their silhouettes bristling with weapons. Phantom and Blaze flanked her, their breath steady wisps in the humid air, their service vests a flimsy veil over the war dogs beneath, their gray and black coats blending into the night like specters of vengeance. Right on cue, Abby whispered into her radio, her voice a low growl of command forged in Baghdad's chaos. Tom, you see, Sheriff Tom Reynolds' voice crackled back through the static, for more on the east, textbook breach. Military tight. The intruders moved like a unit, hand signals flashing in the dark, spacing disciplined and lethal. One knelt by the kennel shed, rigging explosives with the calm of a man who'd blown lives apart before. Abby's mind snapped back to Baghdad, 2016, same playbook, different dirt, cartel scouts torching outposts to sow panic, pin it on faulty wires. They want chaos, blame a gas leak. She murmured, her scarred hands tightening on her binos, knuckles whitening with the memory of smoke and screams. Through her scope, a sharp figure emerged from an SUV parked on the access road, Lucia Vargas. Mateo's sister and the cartel's cold, calculating brain, her tailored jacket cutting a stark line against the night, her presence a chilling promise of escalation. Big guns tonight. Abby said, her voice steady despite the pulse hammering in her chest. She clicked her radio twice, a signal rehearsed 1,000 times. Blaze's howl tore through the silence. A primal roar that froze the intruders mid-step, a sound that echoed back to desert nights where it had meant death for the unprepared. Every light in the facility blazed to life. A blinding flood that turned night to day, pinning the cartel men like rats in a trap. Phantom and Blaze surged forward, shadows weaving through chaos, herding the intruders into the open with no bite, just the raw, unshakable terror of their presence, a psychological blade honed in war. Drop it. Tom's voice boomed through a megaphone, amplified by the stillness, cutting through the cartel's stunned silence. You're trespassing on private property, hands where I can see, The intruders stumbled, their tactical poise crumbling, caught between snarling dogs and flashing deputy lights. Their weapons clattering to the dirt as panic overtook training. Lucia's command sliced the air, pull back, now. Abby tracked her retreat through the scope, their eyes locking for a split second across the floodlit yard, calculation. Not fear, glinting in Lucia's stare, a predator sizing up a rival. The SUVs roared off, tires spitting gravel, leaving behind a scattering of explosives, crude devices wired for destruction. Their casings marked with the haste of men too sure of victory. They'll hit again, Tom said, bagging the evidence with gloved hands, his weathered face tight with the strain of a sheriff outmatched. Always do, Abby replied, studying the claw marks Phantom had left in the dirt, a predator's signature etched in warning. Inside, Jake waited by the shed, his teenage frame tense. Gripping a baseball bat like it could fend off the world. Same crap burned my dad's shop in El Paso, cartel hit, no proof, till now, he said, his voice shaking with a mix of rage and relief. Abby squeezed his arm, her touch steady. We've got M pinned, kid, proof's ours now. Morning broke harsh and unrelenting, the sun baking Dust Valley into a shimmering haze. But the cartel's next move came swift and silent, bank accounts locked without notice, supply runs stalled with vague excuses, the diner's chatter hushed to whispers of fear. Abby rolled into Rose's diner, Phantom and Blaze at her heels, their service vests pristine but their eyes alert, scanning every shadow. Maria, the owner, poured Abby coffee with trembling hands. Her apron stained with the day's grind. They came yesterday, partnership or my kid's school fund dries up, she said, her voice low, her dark eyes darting to the window where a cartel SUV idled across the street. Its tinted glass reflecting the diner's neon like a hunter's gaze. Abby sipped, her gaze locked on Victor Salazar stepping out, his suit crisp, his smirk a blade of arrogance. He strode in, sliding into her booth uninvited. Ms. Grayson, townsfolk are choosing sides, he said, his tone smooth as oil over steel. Or waiting to see who cracks first, Abby shot back. Her voice a quiet challenge, Phantom's growl rumbling low beneath the table, a warning Victor ignored at his peril. Outside, Diego Morales, the cartel's enforcer, roughed up Jake near the truck, shoving him against the hood. His scarred hands flexing with menace, until Phantom's growl stopped him cold, a deep, guttural sound that froze Diego mid-swing. Back off, Abby warned, wheeling out, Blaze at her side. His black coat bristling with intent. Or test my dogs, they don't miss. Diego retreated, his bravado crumbling, and Jake slipped Abby a cloned phone, Lucia's data, snatched in the chaos of the scuffle. Routes, payoffs, huge, he said, his voice steadying with purpose. Abby pocketed it, the war heating up in her blood. That night, Victor's crew hit the facility hard, expecting a soft target, a cripple they could break. Abby was ready, hidden traps sprang to life, floors shifted underfoot, collapsing into shallow pits, strobe lights pulsed in disorienting rhythms, blinding the intruders. Phantom disarmed two in a blur of gray fury. His jaws snapping inches from flesh, while Blaze pinned another against a kennel wall, his growl a promise of ruin stopped only by Abby's command. The cartel men flailed, their tactical training useless against her chaos. Tom's sirens wailed as deputies stormed in, Agent Ryan Holt, DEA, close behind, his badge glinting in the floodlights. 6 dirty badges in your precinct, Ryan said, cuffing Victor as he spat curses. His polished facade shattered. A video call crackled to life on Victor's phone, Mateo, El Toro, Vargas, his scarred face filling the screen, his voice a hiss of rage. Baghdad. Grayson, I remember you. Cost me everything. Abby smirked, leaning into the camera's glare. Good. I gutted your empire then, gonna finish it now. Mateo's laugh was a venomous snarl. You're a ghost in a chair, try me. The call cut, but Abby's resolve hardened. Dust Valley was her ground, her dogs her blades, and the cartel had just lit the fuse on their own destruction. Back at the facility, Abby reviewed the cloned data with Jake, her wheelchair parked by a makeshift command table littered with maps and printouts. Routes snaked from Mexico to Dust Valley. Payoffs traced to local banks, names of dirty cops scrawled in Lucia's precise hand, evidence of an empire stretching beyond the border, its roots sinking deep into Texas soil. They're not just here for us, Abby said, her voice low, her mind racing through Baghdad memories, cartel ops she'd dismantled, only to see them regrow like weeds. They want the whole damn valley. Jake nodded, his young face set with a soldier's grit she'd unwittingly passed down. Then we hit M where it hurts, right here. Phantom and Blaze paced the room, their eyes glinting with the promise of the fight to come. Their service vests a lie hiding the war dogs ready to draw first blood. The cartel thought they'd cornered a cripple, they just awakened a legend, and Dust Valley's reckoning was only beginning. Part 3, Fire and Conspiracy. Dusk bled crimson over Dust Valley, Texas, as the Sangre Roja Cartel struck with brutal precision, their message a roaring inferno that swallowed Miller's feed store whole. Flames clawed at the darkening sky, a beast of orange and black devouring wood and steel, the heat a suffocating wave rolling across the sagebrush plains. Abby Grayson rolled up in her truck. Her wheelchair creaking as she maneuvered onto the gravel, her sharp green eyes cutting through the smoke to assess the chaos. Sheriff Tom Reynolds was already there, his cruiser parked crooked. His deputies herding panicked onlookers back as embers rained like hellfire. Through the haze, Abby spotted Mateo El Toro Vargas leaning against his sleek SUV, his scarred face lit by the blaze. His smirk a predator's gloat as he watched the town's heart burn. Loud and clear, Abby muttered, her voice a blade of resolve honed by years of war, her scarred hands tightening on her chair. She signaled Phantom with a flick of her wrist, and the gray Alpha slipped into the smoke, his service vest a ghost's cloak over a killer's frame, his paws silent on the scorched earth. Abby wheeled toward the barn's rear, away from the crowd, her night vision binos piercing the thick, choking fog. There, Diego Morales, Mateo's enforcer, crouched by a stack of hay bales. Planting fuel cans and wiring with the clumsy haste of a man too sure of his power, his scarred hands fumbling in the flickering light. Careless, Abby whispered, pulling her phone to record video evidence of the cartel's dirty work. Time-stamped and irrefutable, the glow of her screen a faint beacon in the dark. Diego froze as Phantom's shadow loomed, the gray shepherd's eyes glinting like steel in the firelight. A low growl rumbling from his chest. "You're done," Abby said, stepping into view, or rolling, rather, her wheelchair crunching gravel, Blaze at her side, his black coat bristling. His snarl a promise of ruin stopped only by her command. Diego sneered, his hand inching toward the Glock under his jacket, his bravado a thin mask over rising panic. "Big mistake." "Cripple," he spat, but Abby's smile was ice, her voice steady as a sniper's aim. "My dogs are faster, trained to take throats. Move and bleed." Blaze's growl deepened, a sound that echoed back to Baghdad nights where it had meant death. And Diego's nerve cracked, he bolted, scrambling toward Mateo's SUV, leaving the cans behind as Abby pocketed the footage, her heart pounding with the thrill of the hunt. She rejoined Tom near the fire line, where Mateo taunted the sheriff, his voice dripping with mockery over the roar of the blaze. "Should have taken our deal, Reynolds. Accidents happen to stubborn bastards." Abby rolled up. Phone still rolling, capturing every word, every smug twist of his scarred lips. "Funny how deals spark fires. Caught your boy rigging it, Toro," she said, her tone a quiet challenge that made Mateo's smirk twitch. A flicker of rage breaking through his mask. "Prove it, Ghost," he snarled, but his eyes darted to the shadows where Phantom lurked, a gray specter of judgment. Lucia Vargas rolled up then. Her SUV cutting through the chaos like a shark through bloodied water, her sharp features cool as marble, her designer coat a mockery of Dust Valley's grit. "Enough show," she snapped at Mateo. Her voice a whip of control. "Insurance is coming, keep it clean." Abby pulled Tom aside, her voice low and urgent amidst the crackling flames. "They're sloppy, rushing too fast. We've got M on the ropes." Tom nodded, bagging a dropped fuel can, its cartel markings faint but damning. "Feds lead this up," he said, his face grim with the weight of a town under siege. Morning broke harsh and gray, the sun a dull glare over Dust Valley's smoldering scars, and Abby took her nephew Jake to Dr. Emily Carter's vet clinic under the guise of a checkup for Blaze, a thin excuse to dig deeper into the cartel's rot. Emily stitched a nick on Blaze's ear from a training snag, then slid Abby a file under the counter, her hand steady despite the tremor in her voice. "Look at this, stray pup from last week." surgical scars on his flank, stitched like a pro. Abby traced the marks, clean cuts, precise, not the work of accidents or neglect. Drug mules, she said, her mind flashing to Baghdad, where she'd seen mules gutted for coke hauls, their bellies sliced open by cartel knives. Tied to Lucia's shell firms, shipping logs match up. Emily's hazel eyes widened, shock warring with fear. They're smuggling through animals? And ranches, Abby added, her voice a low growl of realization. Cover for their routes, Dust Valley's just the start. The cartel's next move hit that afternoon. Dust Valley's town hall buzzed with tension. A packed room of sweaty ranchers and shopkeepers simmering with unease as Mayor Ellis waved off their warnings with a politician's grin, his suit wrinkled from too many handshakes. These are legit businessmen, bringing jobs, opportunities, he insisted, his voice oily with denial, his desk a polished shield against the truth. Abby sat at the back, Phantom at her feet. His gray bulk invisible under the table, Blaze pacing outside with Jake, their service vests a lie hiding their readiness. A heckler shouted, "By burning our stores?" Ellis countered smoothly. "Accidents prove we need progress." Then the doors slammed open. Agent Ryan Holt, DEA, stormed in with 2 feds, his crisp suit cutting through the room's haze, his badge a glint of authority. "This meeting's federal business now," he announced, projector flashing damning images, scarred dogs, bank trails tracing cartel bribes, shipping manifests tied to Lucia's investments. The crowd erupted in angry murmurs, boots stomping the hardwood floor, voices rising in a chorus of defiance as Emily stepped forward, her vet files in hand. "I've documented those scars, drug smuggling. Not accidents," she said, her voice steady despite the tremble in her fingers. Mateo's phone buzzed, his mask slipping as he burst in, gunmen at his back, their weapons drawn with the casual menace of men who'd killed for less. "Nobody leaves, this town's ours," he roared, his false polish gone, his scarred face a map of rage. Phantom's growl rumbled low, a warning felt more than heard, and Abby signaled. Blaze's howl pierced the chaos outside. A chilling war cry echoing across the plains, state trooper lights flashing as they swarmed the hall. Phantom crashed through a side door, pinning a gunman with a snarl, his gray bulk a blur of fury. While Blaze herded another into Ryan's cuffs, their combat dance turning chaos to order. Mateo and Lucia fought, but the wolves and law closed in, handcuffs clinked as evidence piled high. A mountain of proof that Dust Valley didn't break, it bit back, and Abby's pack drew first blood. Morning peeled back darker layers, warehouses stuffed with guns and cash, payoffs to half the precinct. Old mining tunnels mapped for smuggling beneath the town's bones. Abby turned Dust Valley into a web of resistance. Maria tracked odd deliveries at the diner, farmers watched back roads with binoculars. Jake hacked feeds from a laptop in the shed, his teenage hands steady with purpose. "They're everywhere," he said, showing grainy footage of cartel scouts. "Not for long," Abby replied, her tactical mind spinning. Mateo hit back, targeting K-9 units. Deputy Sarah's dog Rex took a bullet on patrol, a bloody message scrawled in the dirt, "You're next." Abby briefed her crew, Tom, Emily, Ryan, in the facility's shed, maps and photos strewn across a table. "They're scared, hitting dogs means they fear ours," she said, her voice a quiet storm. Evidence piled, tunnels charted. Dirty cops named, a network stretching beyond Texas. Mateo's vendetta wasn't just Dust Valley, it was her, from Baghdad, where she'd gutted his empire, and now he'd come to bury her. "He's personal," Ryan said, flipping a file, Mateo's losses in 16, millions torched by Abby's raid. "Good," she said, Phantom's gray eyes glinting beside her. "Makes him sloppy, our edge." Part 4, Mercenaries and Bio-War. Dust Valley, Texas, shivered under a late summer storm, the Rio Grande swollen and restless beyond the sagebrush plains, its muddy waters churning with the promise of chaos. The Sangre Roja Cartel's first wave, Mateo and Lucia Vargas, rotted in federal pens, their empire bruised but breathing, its roots sinking deeper into the town's bones. The Lone Star K9 facility stood as a defiant bastion. Its kennels and sheds battered by wind and rain, its fences bristling with Abby Grayson's unyielding will. She'd bloodied them with her German shepherds, Phantom and Blaze, but the cartel wasn't done. They'd sent their elite, a cadre of ex-special forces mercenaries armed with bioweapons and Mateo's bottomless cash. Abby watched from her facility's command shed, her wheelchair creaking under her weight. Her sharp green eyes locked on surveillance feeds as Phantom and Blaze stood alert, their service vests dripping wet, their gray and black coats slick with rain. They're pros. She told Agent Ryan Holt, DEA, her voice steady as thunder rumbled overhead, satellite imagery showing black-clad figures moving through the storm. And we're ready, she added. Her scarred hands tracing tactical maps, her mind a steel trap forged in Baghdad's crucible. The cartel's shift hit Dust Valley like a plague, banks froze more accounts, clinics signed exclusive deals with cartel fronts. Power flickered as transformers sparked under sabotage. At Rose's diner, Maria whispered over coffee, her hands trembling as she poured. They hit me again, cooperate or my girl's college fund's gone. Abby sipped, eyes on an SUV outside, Lucia Vargas, stepping out under an umbrella, her tailored coat a stark contrast to the town's grit, her presence a cold blade of intent. She slid into Abby's booth, all charm and venom. Ms. Grayson, your fight's impressive, join us. Your skills, our empire. Blaze growled under the table, his black bulk sensing her lie. His hackles rising like a storm cloud. Your empire's crumbling, Abby said, her voice a quiet rejection, Phantom's gray eyes glinting from the shadows. Lucia's smile didn't waver. Think it over, war's costly. Abby leaned in. So's underestimating me. Abby dug into their game. Dr. Emily Carter's clinic files showed legit medical shipments spiked with anomalies, restricted bioagents. Surgical gear for more than dogs or humans. They're building a weapons lab, Abby told Tom Reynolds over beers at his office, Phantom sprawled by the door, his gray coat a silent sentinel. Using clinics as cover, Baghdad all over again. Tom spread surveillance pics, Lucia meeting bankers, ranchers, even Mayor Ellis, payoffs flowing like blood through the town's veins. They're burying it in plain sight, he said, his face grim with the weight of betrayal. Abby's chance came via Jake. He'd cloned Lucia's phone during a diner drop, his teenage hands steady as he handed her the data. Shipping routes, lab specs, huge, he said, pride flickering in his eyes. They're briefing their crew tonight, Old Quarry Shed. Night fell heavy, rain slashing the plains as Abby ghosted through the storm. Her wheelchair's tires cutting through mud, Phantom and Blaze blending into the wet dark like wraiths on the hunt. Phantom led, his gray form a spectral blur, Blaze fanning wide. Their service vests soaked but their focus razor sharp. The quarry shed loomed, rusted tin and rotting wood, isolated, perfect for Mateo's secrecy. Abby parked on a ridge, planting a mic, Lucia's voice crackled through, bioweapons on schedule, proves we're untouchable. Buyers want results. Her team mapped routes, Mexico to Dust Valley, labs hidden in clinics, a shadow empire of death. Abby snapped photos, documents, schedules, Lucia's meticulous plans laid bare. They expect defense, she whispered to Ryan via radio, rain drumming her hood. Time to hunt. The storm peaked at midnight, winds howling like banshees, rain turning the plains to a quagmire. Abby saw her shot, Mateo's mercenaries rolled south, 3 trucks masked as medical hauls, their SUV in the lead, bioagents primed for the water supply. Checkpoint 1, Jake radioed from his hideout. his voice cutting through static. Security stretched, storm screwing M. Abby signaled Phantom. The gray shepherd vanished into the deluge, Blaze shadowing him, their paws silent in the muck. Seconds later, cartel chatter erupted, movement, multiple contacts. Hold, what the hell? Phantom spooked their convoy's guards, his howl a ghostly wail through the rain. While Blaze trashed comms gear, a black blur in the downpour, turning order to chaos. Abby's civilian trap sprang, blocked roads from flood debris, fake intel fed by Maria's diner chatter, throwing the pros into disarray. Abby watched through her scope, Lucia's cool cracked as she barked, fall back, alternate route. Her driver protested, flood risk. Grayson's bluffing. Lucia snapped, clinging to her plan. Abby smirked, Lucia's precision, her strength, was her undoing. Tom, now, she radioed. Sheriff lights flared, boxing the convoy as federal choppers buzzed overhead, their rotors slicing the storm. Phantom's howl cut through again, guards scattering, bioagents swapped for duds by Blaze's stealth days prior. You forgot the wild, Lucia, Abby patched into their radio, her voice a cold blade. Instinct beats your toys. Agent Ryan led the takedown, cuffs snapped on mercenaries as evidence piled, biotoxins, forged manifests, their legit labs gutted. Dust Valley's storm became their grave. Abby's dogs burying their plans in mud and ruin. But shadows deepened, black SUVs rolled in at dawn, no cartel markings, just lethal precision. Black Ops teams, CIA, NSA, hit hard. Shredding evidence with military-grade gear. Abby's facility became a war zone, Phantom and Blaze infiltrated, snagging files, bioweapons funded by DC, cartels as pawns for black projects. They're cleaning house, Ryan said, stunned, his DEA badge useless against shadow soldiers. Regular army clashed with them, choppers buzzing as Congress took note, Abby's trap widened. Every move these ghosts made proving their guilt, every burned file a breadcrumb to the top. Dust Valley trembled, but Abby's wolves held the line, their gray and black forms a promise of justice in the storm's dying light. Part 5, Final Reckoning and Justice. Summer scorched Dust Valley, Texas, the Rio Grande a sluggish artery beyond the sagebrush plains, its banks cracked under a relentless sun that baked the earth into a brittle shell. The Lone Star K-9 facility stood as a battered citadel, its kennels and sheds scarred by months of war, its fences a testament to Abby Grayson's iron will. The Sangre Roja Cartel's Navarro siblings and their mercenaries lay broken. But Mateo, El Toro, Vargas unleashed hell, 200 contractors, corrupt cops, bioweapons in a final, desperate stand to reclaim his empire. Abby stood on her ridge overlooking the facility. Her wheelchair creaking under her weight, her sharp green eyes locked on the horizon as Phantom and Blaze flanked her, their gray and black coats glinting with sweat, their service vests dripping in the heat. No more games, she told her nephew Jake, handing him a radio, her voice steady as the plains shimmered with haze. Tom, town's locked? Sheriff Reynolds confirmed, every street's a kill zone, Dust Valley's ours. Mateo's assault came at noon, a thunderous wave of military-grade force, black-clad mercenaries, ex-special forces with automatic rifles, rolling in Humvees and armored vans. Their bioweapons primed to poison the water supply. Abby watched from her ridge, Phantom's gray bulk alert, Blaze's black form coiled, their service vests a lie hiding their readiness. They're all in, she radioed Ryan Holt, DEA, her scarred hands tracing tactical maps as dust clouds rose on the horizon. Civilians fought, Maria's barricades of delivery trucks blocked roads. Farmers ambushed patrols with shotguns from the brush, Jake's hacked feeds misdirected their comms. Phantom's howl shattered their channels, a primal wail that turned order to chaos. While Blaze darted through the fray, a black shadow trashing gear and sowing panic. They're breaking, Tom reported, his voice crackling with grit as deputies held the line downtown. Federal choppers roared in after hours of hell, their rotors slicing the sky as Agent Ryan led the takedown. Cuffs snapped on Mateo, his scarred face a mask of rage, Lucia crumbling beside him as $2 billion in assets fell. Their empire ash. "You're done, Toro," Abby said, wheeling close as troopers hauled him off, Phantom's gray eyes glinting with judgment. "Dust Valley's my ground, you underestimated the wrong ghost." Mateo spat, his voice a venomous snarl. "I'll rebuild, always do." Abby smirked, her voice cold. "Not this time, your own moves buried you." A month later, Dust Valley rebuilt under a gentler sun, clinics reopened with clean cash. Streets buzzed with honest life, the scars of war fading into resilience. Congressional hearings gutted the cartel government nexus, black ops teams exposed, their CIA and NSA ties unraveled by files Phantom and Blaze had snatched. Their service vests hiding their stealth. Abby trained dogs in the facility's yard, Jake at her side tossing treats to a new pup, Phantom and Blaze pacing the perimeter, their gray and black forms ever watchful. "They'll try again," Tom warned, sipping coffee on her porch, his Stetson shading a face etched with pride and weariness. "Different masks, same evil." Abby grinned, fierce and unbroken. "Let em. We've got teeth, Dust Valley doesn't bend." The hearings played on a radio in the shed, voices of senators grilling agency heads, evidence piling like a landslide, bioweapons funded by D.C., cartels as pawns, regular army testimonies clashing with shadow ops lies. "They thought they'd bury us," Ryan said, joining them, his DEA badge glinting in the sunlight. "You turned their game against em." Abby nodded, her wheelchair creaking as she leaned back, Phantom's head resting on her knee. "Baghdad taught me, let em build their empire, then make it their tomb." Jake chimed in, his teenage voice steady with purpose. "We're stronger now, whole town's a pack." Emily Carter arrived, her vet truck rumbling up, her files adding to the congressional pile, proof of bioagents. Lab specs, all traced back to the top. Dust Valley stood tall, a crippled woman, her dogs, and a town turned weakness into victory, proving justice bites hardest when underestimated. The plains stretched wide under an endless sky, the Rio Grande a quiet witness to their triumph, its waters flowing clean again. Abby watched Phantom and Blaze patrol, their service vests pristine. Their eyes glinting with the promise of vigilance. "They'll come with new faces," she said, her voice a quiet vow. "And we'll be waiting, always will." The radio crackled with a senator's voice, systematic corruption exposed, agencies accountable. Abby's smile was a blade, her pack a shield, Dust Valley's reckoning had rewritten the rules, and the wolves of war had claimed their peace. Life lessons from the story. Don't judge a fighter by their scars. Abby Grayson, a wheelchair-bound vet, seems like easy prey, until her special ops grit and dogs, Phantom and Blaze, crushed the Sangre Roja Cartel. Looks lie, America's fiercest warriors often rise from the ashes. Proving strength's in the spirit, not the shell. Loyalty is a weapon that never fails. Phantom and Blaze don't just protect Abby, they fight for her nephew Jake and Dust Valley. Toppling a narco-empire. Loyalty, to kin, to your crew, is a force that cuts through steel, a Texas-sized truth that turns underdogs into legends. Smarts beat muscle every time. The cartel's guns and goons fall to Abby's traps and a town's cunning. Brains trump brawn, strategy honed in Baghdad and perfected in Dust Valley shows real powers in outsmarting. Not overpowering the enemy. Evil thrives in the dark, expose it. Mateo's brutality, Lucia's schemes, and Black Ops bioweapons hide behind masks, until Abby's proof tears them off. Corruption hates light, shine it bright, and it crumbles, a call to every American to dig for truth. Courage turns weakness into strength. Abby doesn't blink when the cartel targets her home, she strikes with dogs and guts. Courage isn't about standing, it's about fighting from your knees, a lone star stand that echoes frontier defiance. A united town is unbreakable. Abby's win comes from her pack. Jake, Maria, Tom, and Dust Valley's everyday folks, together, they bury giants. Alone, you're vulnerable, united, you're a wall. It's small-town America's superpower. Truth cuts through lies like a blade. The cartel's web, bribes, fronts, bio-threats, collapses under Abby's evidence, from tunnels to congressional hearings. Truth slices lies apart, wield it with grit, and justice thunders like a Texas storm. Overreach digs your own grave. Mateo's all-in assault, mercenaries, dirty cops, exposes his empire to ruin. Stretch too far, and you snap, America's seen it, ambition without roots is a tombstone waiting. Hey, patriots and thrill seekers, Abby and her dogs just showed us what real American grit looks like. Which lesson hits you hardest? Drop it in the comments. Did Abby's smarts or her pack's loyalty fire you up most? Ever faced a fight where you turned weakness into a win? Share your story, we're all ears. Hit that like if you'd back Abby's wolves in a showdown. And subscribe for more tales of justice with teeth, next one's gonna blow the roof off. Ring the bell so you don't miss it, and tell us, who's the phantom or blaze in your life? Let's keep Dust Valley's spirit alive, talk to us. These lessons tap into America's love for underdogs, loyalty, and justice. Abby's a Texas warrior, her wheelchair a badge of honor, her dogs a symbol of unyielding spirit. The call to action hooks viewers with personal stakes: your stories. Your heroes and bold prompts like, subscribe, comment, building a community around Dust Valley's fight. It's a rally for the resilient, a nod to small-town toughness, and a challenge to stand tall, wheelchair or not, when evil comes knocking. Want more engagement ideas? Let me know.